F1 has announced big sprint changes. So let's break this down then. Okay, so how I see this is that we now have 2 race weekends in a race weekend. In a sprint race weekend, that is. We have
pretty much
qualifying for the Grand Prix on the Friday, which I think is going to be the main annoyance or continued annoyance for Formula One fans that are working, that might not be able to catch something on the Friday, because that is the most important qualifying of the 2. The Saturday one, of course, is the sprint shootout / qualifying, and that's the one where you'd like to think a lot of people will be able to tune into, as it is on the Saturday. And then you have the sprint race later on, and then the Grand Prix is, of course, what happens from the Friday qualifying rather than anything to do with the sprint race. So we do genuinely have 2 opportunities for Max to win comprehensively.
And one thing I would say as well is, if you're a casual fan, which is what this kind of presents itself to be, you'd argue that actually you now dedicate more of your Saturday than you do the Sunday, because you've got to tune in for 2 very meaningful sessions, whereas on the Sunday there's only 1.
I'm going to not give too much in terms of, my set in stone opinion, because I need to see how this will actually work out in Baku this weekend. But I do wonder if that does take away a little bit from the Sunday Grand Prix, which is supposed to be the highlight, the standout event. And instead, Saturday seems to be that one that's just going to be absolute craziness. Like the sprint shootout, for example, medium tyres need to be used in Q1 and Q2, and Q3 soft tyres. Now, I don't know if they have 1, 2 sets of tyres, 3 sets of tyres. I don't think that's actually been clarified yet, as far as I've seen. Which is insane, because it's Baku this weekend, and you'd think that all of this information would be readily available to all of us.
The first thing that really jumped out on me was 8 minutes in Q3. Now that, for me, they've reduced the time of the sprint shootout format, because they realised that, there's Formula One parts, and they've got to last a whole season, so you don't want to have loads of really long sessions again. So they've kind of reduced it. But for me, 8 minutes is borderline too long for a 1-lap shootout and too short for a 2-lap shootout like we normally get. So my first thought is a little bit concerned that we might end up with an elimination qualifying style failure, where everyone goes out at the start of the session, you do 1 lap, and then everyone realizes that there's not enough time to go out again. Or you just get 5 minutes at the start of the session where everyone's just sat in the pits waiting for the end.
The one track, let's not forget, that's on here is Belgium.
That's a sprint
7 kilometers
weekend.
long. Yeah. Now, I think the 8 minutes might just be perfect for a 1-lap shootout if it's round Spa, because it's a 1 minute 40 odd lap time. And of course, you have to have an in and an out lap around that as well. I don't know. I don't think I'm as concerned as you are about this being some sort of like non-crescendo that it could well be. I feel as though, if anything, it might actually turn up the carnage somewhat, because I think you might have some drivers that'll want to rush round, set a lap, get in, and then come out again for their second lap, whereas some may not be able to do that if they don't have track position. So it could be the case of like this sprint shootout becomes a mini race, to get round the track, get in and have another go.
If the whole point is it's exciting because they're only going to get 1 run, personally, I would like to see in Q3, they just go out in order of what it was in Q2. That top 10 with the person in first in Q2 goes out last, and the person that just got through goes out first, and you get to watch every single lap, and then people just do 1 lap.
I wonder if the reason they don't do that is because of time. Yeah, because you will have, let's say, 1:30 for a lap. You'll have the out lap for that first driver, which is 1:30. Then you'll have them do a lap. And then
you're probably looking at about 20 minutes, half an hour.
At least. I think it'd probably be around the sort of 25-minute mark. It's going to be weird as well, having seen qualifying for the Grand Prix, which is the longer, more meaningful session. And then into Saturday, we have the exact same thing we saw at the end of Friday, but shorter. And we kind of already know the results.
I guess the one positive thing, if we want to put a positive on, is that the qualifying, a proper qualifying session decides the grid on Sunday, which for the stat people that was always confusing. That what's a pole position? Is it when you win the sprint, or is it when you do qualifying? That kind of clears it up now, because it's just qualifying for the Grand Prix.
I'm willing to give it a go. I can't give a fully measured approach to this until I've actually seen it unfold. Maybe not even just at Baku, because Baku could very much give us absolute carnage for every single day this week. And we go, this is the greatest thing since sliced bread. But until we maybe get into a more normal circuit, that's when we can properly judge it. I think that we've started this podcast very much as this is a bit rubbish, isn't it? When I actually, we're more just kind of dissecting and going, how do we make this a 10 out of 10? Rather than, this is rubbish.
I'm not saying it's terrible.
I'm not
it's just like, it's all right.
Because I'm actually, I think this will be better than having to endure an FP2 that means absolutely nothing, like even less than before, where, qualifying's done. They're literally going out there to find out how long the tyres last, and it is pointless. So I'm absolutely willing to give it a shot. Let's move into the first question. It comes in from msolly98. I like the idea, but is there any way they can make the sprint count into the race weekend? If not, why does the driver even care showing up to the sprint if it might ruin their car before Sunday? Seems like high risk, no reward for most of the drivers and teams. Now, it's probably worth mentioning that the points haven't changed. So it's 8 all the way down to 1 for the top 8 and no more points after that. So it does open up a big question of why would Alpha Tauri bother even racing, or even, why would they even use their allocation of parts? Now, also worth mentioning at this point that the allocation of a few of the, the ICE and the power unit, etc., that they've all been increased by 1. But the control electronics, which is one of the which Charles Leclerc has already used 3 of, and you're only allowed to use 2 over the course of a whole season, has not changed. So you still are only allowed 2.
Yeah, this is the thing that stands out to me, is that the fact that if you qualify 19th, the sprint, at least if there's some collisions or whatever, you will keep racing, and even if you finish 10th and don't get a single point, you're starting the Grand Prix in 10th. But I guess a race like Baku, you hope there's so much carnage that you might get a point. But yeah, it does feel a little bit pointless for those at the back.
Jones_RF873 says, is the sprint now a waste for slower teams?
Feels that way.
Yeah, I would say so. I mean, has it always been a waste, I would argue? Like, has it ever been the top 8 scoring points? Has that ever been good for a team that's right at the back? No, because there's never enough carnage for it to unfold. So I don't think that's particularly changed. The only thing, of course, is the fact the sprint is its own isolated thing. But let's not forget that the cost cap still exists. It's not like the teams are going, have a go. Just send it.
Send it.
Doesn't
into
matter
turn
if you
1.
completely explode your car. We'll get another one for Sunday. One, it's a huge reparation job if you do wreck your car on Saturday for Sunday. But also the 145 million or whatever it is now, because I know they incrementally changed it, is still there. And it costs a lot of money to repair a fully damaged Formula One car. So I imagine for those back running teams, still it'll be a case of, well, unless you are, maybe skirting around the 10th, 11th, 12th mark, it's not really much point. And they might even turn into, I would argue, these sprint races as a kind of a practice session for the 8th, 9th, 10th slowest teams.
Yeah.
They can just go around and do laps and get ready for Sunday.
This is the big con, I think, that the back teams don't really have much to fight for. Like literally nothing to fight for, because they don't even get a good place on the grid if they miss out on points. So yeah, it's disappointing for them. And it'll be interesting to see how they approach it.
So with the sprint weekend now having, there isn't that feeling of progression throughout the weekend, right? It is literally 2 race weekends. Doesn't matter what happens in the sprint, it's not going to affect the race weekend. Does that kind of put Saturday in jeopardy somewhat, in terms of, if it doesn't work, if it's not as exciting, do people just not bother watching Saturday because there's only 8 points on the line, and qualifying is this shorter format of qualifying that they've already seen on the Friday?
It's so weird, this, because there's so many pros and cons of each thing. Every time they change it, you go, oh, this is better. But then, because I was like, oh, the qualifying for Friday is better because it now decides the grid. But then that makes now Friday a really important qualifying session that you really don't want to miss. But then the whole complaint was that people are at work. Whereas when you had the qualifying there, it worked well because you at least knew that, at least if you watch the sprint, you know what the qualifying order is going to be. So, yeah.
I completely agree, Frank. Final question comes in from Anax_MaxTech. Do you believe the sprint format is better now since the whole point of qualifying is the race order and now the sprint quali/race has nothing to do with it? For me, do I believe it's better now? There's one less practice session. So I think on paper, I think we'll enjoy it more. Whether it'll actually be better, I think we're just going to have to wait and see.
Yeah, this is a really difficult one because I have been the biggest flag bearer for get rid of practice sessions and have more meaningful sessions. But now we've actually got it. I think this is the problem. I just don't think it is the perfect solution. It's great to have more meaningful sessions, but there will be some people that, yeah, I think what you said is a really interesting concept, actually, that could the Saturday have the opposite effect where you go, you know what, I'm not even going to watch sprint qualifying. I'll find out what the result is. I want to have a bit more of my Saturday. And especially if we get to the point where the sprint has no redeeming qualities whatsoever, other than just they qualify and they finish in the order that they've qualified in. So then you could argue, what's the point of qualifying? Because then you're just running a mini race where everyone just stays in the same order, and all that really, the only bit of jeopardy is that rolling start. Yeah, it is really a case of we're going to have to wait and see.
Absolutely. And you kind of touched upon it as well, the Saturday requiring quite a bit of time from people. 2 different times of day as well, you'd have to imagine, with a few hours in between. That's also an interesting thing, is that maybe Formula One have gone, hello, cha-ching, dollar eyes emojis through their eyes, because they're essentially creating 2 programs on one day. So that's got to be wheelbarrows of cash straight to the bank.
I'm very curious to know, actually, the viewing figures from the evening Friday qualifying session that matters a lot to the Saturday sprint qualifying, which on theory is a better day for viewership because it's on a Saturday, but is less important. I think that's going to be really interesting to see, and the viewing figures, whether we get that information released.
Before we go, Tommy, what is your ideal format?
I think I'm still just sad that we didn't get the 1-lap shootout in Q3. There were rumours that could be the case.
We might still get it, kind of,
but they'll all be on track potentially at the same time, and then we'll just see 8 minutes where we'll probably maybe only see like Verstappen on a hot lap, and then as he crosses the line we see 3 seconds of everyone else that crosses the line after him. This has been one of those things where I should be want to jump on Twitter and go, oh my god, this and this, but actually I'm just kind of not underwhelmed, but just a bit like, okay, we'll see how it goes.
And I think it's a fair way to look at it, is let's just give it a go. Let's not jump to conclusions and see if this format actually works. Maybe this whole medium soft thing in SQ1 and SQ2 and SQ3 will actually be an unbelievable way of doing qualifying. We'll have to wait and see. Tommy, final thoughts, sir?
My final thoughts are happy birthday, Frank.
I love how you either use your dog now as noises down the microphone, or you wish him happy birthday.
Hey, it's his birthday.
Quite something. Fair enough. My final thoughts are, cannot wait for Formula One to finally be back. We'll be live on Twitch Friday, Saturday and Sunday for your viewing pleasure whilst we watch Ferrari and whatever they end up doing. Although I am now an Alpine fan if you are watching on YouTube. And we'll see you very soon for another video or podcast. Bye!
Bye!